All right. This is definitely a change of pace. So this is a place where we're really going to be getting away from the setup menu. So now we're going to be doing some more sort of pure development work where we're typing code, or at least it's markup language syntax. Okay. All right, so let's dive into this. So we're going to talk about visualforce, all the things we can do in visualforce. We're going to talk about things like all types of stuff: static resources, Ajax, partial page refreshes, custom controllers, iterating over data, standard tags, custom components. There's a whole slew of stuff that we're going to be getting into. Now, the necessary ingredient here is familiarity and understanding of HTML and XML type syntax. So the visualforce pages themselves are very similar to, a lot of HTML type stuff. The syntax is more, technically it adheres to XML rules. We'll talk about that in a second, but it's web design stuff. You're designing web pages using an HTML-like syntax, and we do a lot more stuff on top of that. So it's you'll see that there's a server-side execution aspect to all this, but it is web design concepts. Okay. All right, so let's get going. Visualforce. We are going to be doing some programmatic editing of our user interface, right? So this is the most custom user interface that we can create is through our visualforce pages. I guess S controls you can also to a certain degree, but all right. We're going to talk about where visualforce fits in, just a high-level overview of visualforce. All right. So visualforce allows you to create custom user interfaces, and it can be for any of your applications. It can actually be used not just by web browser-based pages, but you could also do something with a mobile device. So we have the ability to create visualforce pages that are intended for a mobile device. Okay. If we compare this to our page layouts on the left-hand side and visualforce pages on the right-hand side, the page layouts, you're really controlling the organization of the data, where it, where the data is, some properties like required, read-only, stuff like that, which related lists appear, which buttons, but it's really kind of organizational stuff. It's not like you have the amount of control that you have on the right-hand side with visualforce. With visualforce over there on the right-hand side, you have the ability to edit the underlying markup. So if you want to use your own style sheets and you want to use standard HTML and JavaScript in addition to the dynamic components that we supply you, you can do that. Okay. So, in fact, this is an application that one of our partners, who are actually up on the second or third floor, they're called Aperio. And this is a page that they created as a part of a demo as an employee directory. As you can see, it looks nothing like a Salesforce application. It's completely based on their styles. So, and the CTO of that company is a guy named Narinder Singh, and that is his picture there. So, and you might see him in the lunch cafeteria. So you can introduce yourself. So, all right. Visualforce was released back in summer '08, and it allows you to replace those page layouts with your own custom web pages. Okay? All right. In addition, it allows us to call custom controllers. So we can do some cool stuff like, if you think about we'll talk about MVC, but in the Java world there are servlets. Well, by using our visualforce pages, which are more like a JSP, or it's purely the presentation layer, it also opens up the possibility to do a custom controller, which is equivalent roughly to a servlet, something like that. Okay, so that's that advanced business logic. There is a tool called the visualforce inline editor, and this is one of the main ways to edit your visualforce pages. There's actually two other main ways to edit visualforce pages. I'll show them to you right now. So in the tool, your visualforce pages will be here under develop and then pages. And in my case, I don't have any, but if I did, they would appear here and I could edit them. In addition, in the force.com IDE, you can also edit your visualforce pages in this org that we're looking at here. I could take a look. Here's a candidate search page. And I'm going to expand this. So within the force.com IDE, which is our Eclipse-based tool, which you can all download from developer.force.com, you could edit your pages through this facility. Okay. Now the best way, in my opinion, to edit these, although maybe if you're doing large ones, using this tool is the best, but the one I normally utilize is the inline editor. Now, as you can see from the slide, the inline editor, what it does is it allows you to preview your pages, but then to see the markup associated with that page in a separate area down below. All right. And we will we'll take a look at that, and we'll utilize that while we're doing the lab exercises. Okay. Visualforce pages execute initially at the server, at the Salesforce servers. So when a user goes out there and they request a Visualforce page by clicking on a link or clicking on a button, or if they're redirected to a Visualforce page, Visualforce pages execute at the server. Now the output of that Visualforce page is going to be standard HTML, JavaScript, standard web content that's going to be returned down to the requesting web browser. What can Visualforce pages contain? Well, there's something called Visualforce tags or Visualforce components, which will generate output HTML and JavaScript for you for depending upon the purpose of that component. Okay? Visualforce components are executed at the server. Okay? There's something called force.com expressions. We have our expression syntax. The expression syntax is it allows us to do things like dynamic data binding. The expression syntax, you will see a curly brace, exclamation, and then we could reference, for instance, an object and then a field in that object. We close it with a curly brace, and then that'll allow us to dynamically insert the value of a field into a page. We call that data binding. Okay. And then the last four things there are, I lump all of those together into one group, and to me they're just standard web browser content. So if you create some standard web content and we're going to go, okay, this is just standard web content, we can't do anything with it from a server-side execution, we're just going to assume that you want to send this down to the requesting web browser so that the web browser can do something with it. So any sort of standard web content that you want to include within your pages, you can include within Visualforce pages. And that's what allows us to create applications like the one I just showed you the screenshot that Aperio created that allows you to do something that it has, looks nothing like Salesforce. Okay. All right. Those Visualforce tags, they generate a bunch of HTML output, and the idea behind these is that with a limited amount of coding, if you will, or by creating one of these Visualforce tags, we can output a lot of HTML. So in some cases, certain tags they'll generate not just a lot of output HTML, but also a lot of JavaScript that allows interactivity for your users between the page. Some of the times it'll save you, having to write 90% more lines, or 90% fewer, I guess, which is, yeah, so factor of 10 or something. I mean, that's just a rough estimate or whatever. But. All right, here's an example of a tag that does not save you 90%. In the middle here, we have the apex image. So right off the bat, our visualforce components are identified by the apex namespace. And so what you'll see is the tags start with apex colon and then whatever the tag is. So in this case, this is an image tag. This image tag, this visualforce image tag, has a number of attributes. It has an ID, a value, a width, and a height. So what this does is it produces the HTML right below it. So there's an image tag, and here you'll see that the source, so in this case our attribute is called value, but in the case of an image tag it's called source, and then width and height. So this produces the standard HTML. So web browsers don't know anything about apex colon. They don't know what to do with visualforce components. But we never send the web browser a visualforce component. Our visualforce components produce the HTML that ends up going down to the web browser. So,
can you say that again? Visualforce component.
Produce.
Oh, the HTML that's sent down to the browser.
So that first line produces the second line in the middle.
Does that mean we can write directly the second line instead of the first line?
You could write this if you wanted to. You could write the second line. Just make sure that the web browser can access wherever that link location is. So, all right. So that's why I was saying a lot of the time it saves you a lot of markup. Sometimes it's like, oh, well, what's the benefit here?
Like here.
What's that?
Like here.
Is there an IntelliSense?
There is to a certain degree, but not a lot. Like you talking about the kind of the code complete stuff? Is that what you mean? Yeah. So when you're creating your visualforce pages, you'll notice that once you do the angle bracket and then apex, it's going to give you a list of all the components. And then you select the one you want, and then when you type in the first letter of the attribute, it's going to then go, okay, do you want this attribute? You can hit the character term. So in other cases, sometimes you don't see it click in. Yeah. So for the most part, it does. Yeah.
Is there a difference between the tools, the three ways, in terms of IntelliSense?
Yeah. So the IntelliSense in the inline editor, the web browser-based tool, in my opinion, is much better than the one in the force.com IDE. So in fact, let me, so if I do, yeah, this doesn't, in the force.com IDE, it doesn't even do it in this case. We do have IntelliSense for Apex code, but it doesn't do it for the Visualforce stuff.
So that's just the block it generated over there on the right in the IDE?
Oh, this is just an outline? You mean what's this?
So it's not all the things, okay.
Yeah, this is just an outline of all the different things. So although with here you get this look.
You do get, you're right, the block section,
yeah.
right, okay.
Yeah.
But that was generated by putting in.
Does this format it for you?
Is
so
it
like, or you indented this yourself?
Oh no, I indented it myself. Yeah. So. All right. Now what you're going to end up using though is the you're going to end up using the inline editor, like me. Oh, this is just a demo org that I use. See, this is some random announcement. Fantastic demo. So, all right. So if I go to my recruiting application, in fact, here's what one of my super smart students did last week.
You can just say me by name, it's okay.
Herman. Let's see here. Oh, how do I, oh, I thought I could launch the game. Oh, here it is. Oh. All right, let's get away from the reversey. He wrote a game of, have you ever played Othello? Can't figure out how to actually launch the game. Oh, game 0? No, that's not going to do it. All right, let's get away from this. During Dev 501 class, he wrote an Othello game in Visualforce. Hey.
You'll see a much better one next week.
The challenge has been issued. All right, I'm looking forward to that now. All right. Okay, so my point, though, was not to advertise for him, but so here's what's called the inline editor, and it does do IntelliSense. So if I do Apex, so notice that I have this list here. Okay, so I'm able to select something. So, and then it says, oh, okay, what's my attributes? All right, I want to do event, and then blah, blah, blah. Okay. So, all right. Okay. So in most other examples, like I said, generates more code. One of the things you might want to do a lot of is use the view source. So if you've ever done web development, the resulting web page, you'd want to go out there and see the HTML that was produced and the JavaScript. And so often, you'll find yourself going to your page and selecting view page source in order to see what we produced. So a lot of the times, in that case where we're saving you a lot of typing, well, that means we're doing a lot of typing. So we're producing a lot of markup. And so you're going to want to go out there and see, well, what did we do on your behalf, or what did we produce? Okay. So as you can see, there's a lot of stuff. Okay. All right.
So does that mean that everything you write in Visualforce pages or using Apex at the end is converted to HTML pages?
No, because there's certain non-visual components. So for instance, there's a component called Apex variable, and it creates essentially an alias variable for something, a reference to something, completely non-visual. It helps you, it improves your coding by reducing the amount of typing you have to do by creating essentially an alias. So there's stuff out there that executes on the server that doesn't necessarily produce something visual. Okay. All right. Visualforce benefits. So Visualforce is metadata aware. So one of the things that you can do in Visualforce, for instance, is to insert an input field, and it will look at the metadata and go, okay, if the data type of this field is a date, I'm going to render a calendar widget. If the input is a text, I'm going to render a single line entry field. If it is if the data type is a pick list, then I'm going to render a select list or a drop-down list. Okay, so it does some cool stuff for you where it looks at the metadata and goes, okay, this is the appropriate web control to display, so this is what I'm going to display for you. It's tightly coupled with the platform in the sense that these execute on the server. So it's server-side execution, so you should see very good performance with executing your Visualforce pages. Okay. This is kind of a dig on S-controls, and this is one of the reasons we got away from S-controls. So there's another technology called S-controls that will be deprecated next year. And S-controls execute on the web browser, and they do web service callouts, and that creates 2 round trips for every single thing that you do. And so the performance is therefore not nearly as good as server-side execution and immediate access to the data, so, and doing just 1 round trip in terms of your HTTP calls. So. Also, they also recreate the standard Salesforce look and feel. So you'll see that it's, if you want to recreate that page layout look, you can make it so your users don't even know that they're going to Visualforce pages unless they know the secrets that you will soon know. So, all right. Automatically upgraded to the next release, and this is sort of partially true now because in summer '09 we introduced versioning with Visualforce pages. So every Visualforce page now has a piece of metadata associated with it, which is a version number. So if you write a Visualforce page and it's at version 15, which was spring '09, we won't automatically update that. So that will continue to work using the spring '09 interpreter. So because the version number is associated with your page, it will use the interpreter of that version. So we're able to retain backwards compatibility by being able to continue to run your pages at that version. So let's say that down the road we decide, you know what, input field, let's completely change what it does. Let's make it do blinking text now. And suddenly everyone logs in and suddenly all the text is blinking and you hate it. Well, because we have a version associated with your Visualforce page, you can then decide whether or not you want to update that page to use the blink technology that we introduced. Okay?
And that's also all via updating your version of Visualforce.
Exactly. So the Visualforce page now contains so if I go here to my pages and I take a look at my pages, and so here's, not sure what this one does. So let's see here. Version settings. So this one is currently at version 16. But I have some other ones that were back there that were at version 15. Okay? So same thing goes with Apex code, actually.
Is it API version? Is that what it is?
Yeah. So it's the version of, yeah, I don't know why they're calling it API, but...
So does that mean that if you have an application that has been set up by just by using the usual setup menus, you will always automatically upgrade to the latest version? But if you use the visual...
Yeah, so there's not, when you're using the, so let's see here, where's the... There's not, if you create a new page, and I'll show you how to do this later, but if you create a new page through the visual, so demo, hopefully I don't have one. So if I create a page here, I don't think there's an ability to set the version. It just automatically does the latest version. So
anything you create at that point would be the...
Yeah.
No, I'm talking about the existing ones. You have an existing solution you are using now, and in winter '09 you have a new version. And if you don't have any Visualforce pages, then you're going to start using the new version of this Salesforce.com automatically.
By default, yeah. The pages you write will be at the latest version.
So, but you are using Visualforce pages, they will stay in the...
Exactly, so they now are, essentially they're now tagged with the version that they were created in, so that, like I said, if we change the behavior of a tag, we won't change your existing pages. New pages that you create will use the new behavior, but the existing ones, because they're tagged with a previous version of the Visualforce interpreter, those will continue to execute as they always did.
So that statement doesn't hold true that it automatically upgrades, right?
Well, yeah, not really anymore. I mean, it does. You know, they're all upgraded. You know, in the sense that, you know, I have an org here, and you know, everything was upgraded, but the version was not updated. So, yeah. I guess it's, I don't know. It depends on how you determine, you know, how you interpret the term upgraded. But.
Did you say you can upgrade to the next version though?
Yeah, so if I jump over here, and I'm logged into 2 orgs, but So I should be able to click on this and then, yeah, here we go. So here, I'm going to update it to 16, and then now I can save with the new version.
Now you have your blinking text.
Will it give you error messages if for some reason there's some incompatibility moving up?
I would assume so, but I've never tested that. You know, one thing that's a golden rule is that we do not store it in the metadata database unless it passes the syntax checker. So I don't know why we would not apply that here. So I'm going to assume yes. Yeah.
So you have control over the version.
You do have control over the versioning, yeah. Now you have control over the versioning though, but you can't, I don't think you can ever go backwards. So notice that I didn't have 14.0 or 13.0 or something like that. So I can upgrade, but I can't.
Now that you change it to 16, you won't get the 15?
Oh, well I can, let's give that a try. So I didn't actually change it. I'm sneaky like that. So let's do save.
If the same mafia thing is applicable here, then you will not be able to go back.
Exactly.
Save.
No turning back.
Ah, interesting.
Different one.
Different mafia. And more flexible. So
More options.
So, but why is it listed as a benefit? So it means that something is not
you know,
upgradable.
I mean, it's not really a visual force benefit per se. It's a sales force benefit. So every 4 months, Salesforce upgrades systems, upgrades the application. They introduce new features. Well, you know, in the old debate of, or not old debate, it's a new debate. You know, software as a service versus software that you, on-premise software that you do yourself. Well, you know, when Oracle or, you know, SAP say, hey, we got a new version of the software. Well, you got to go out there, you got to download it, you got to apply the patch. You know, upgrading the system is not done automatically on your behalf. So, you know, a big thing of what we do at Salesforce is to apply, you know, updates, whether it be patches or whether it be new features, to implement those new features without you having to do that yourself. And so it's a huge cost savings, you know.
When you do those automatically, don't you get any complaints from the customers? Because probably you are changing the setups, configuration parts. If we did it in our current solutions, we would probably be very busy with the complaints. But what happened to our
well, a lot of the times what we do is, let me, I don't want to get too off topic here, because I know we got a lot of stuff to do, but a lot of the times we'll come out with a new feature. And what we'll do is we'll go, okay, in summer '09, we have now created a new look and feel for reports. And in fact, I already enabled mine. So actually, let me go to user interface. So one thing that we did was we go, okay, there's an enhanced page layout editor. So it's a new feature that we've enabled. But we don't convert everyone over to the new page layout editor overnight. We say the new feature is out there. If you want, you can go in and you can enable it. But you know, it's now essentially in your toolbox. And if you want to use it, then
you just add new things, then you don't change the existing one.
No, we do though. So certain things, you know, there's features that we churn on by default. So if it's something that we go, okay, this isn't gonna, you know, it's not gonna be something that's gonna necessarily break anything, or, you know, make, you know, like we're changing the UI and suddenly Monday morning people are like, what the, you know, what happened here. We do. We just automatically roll it out. So for instance, notice that all these new icons here, so these are new features where it was automatically updated, and they just appear and we highlight them with new to indicate that it's a new feature that's available. In other cases, if it is something that's significant and especially a change to the UI, we say, here it is, here's the announcement, but you need to go in as an administrator and you need to enable it for your end users. Okay? We also offer early access, so you can get an environment for the purpose of trying out new features. So there's a lot of stuff we do in that regard. Okay? All right. So, all right. It also fits in nicely with the MVC architecture. So MVC stands for Model View Controller. Visualforce pages are the view. The purpose of the view is to provide a presentation layer. Okay, that's exactly what Visualforce pages do. There are controllers which exist, and we'll talk about those later, but you can utilize the standard controllers or create custom controllers. Okay? And then our data model, ultimately we're operating on the same database. So the data model is, much like any other relational database you'd be accessing. In fact, you're kind of already using MVC. So when you're, even when you're using page layouts, it's kind of an MVC sort of architecture. You're requesting a page, you click on a button that sends a request to the controller. The controller might check the database, might not, and then it forwards you to a different location based on what you selected. So, yeah, so I'm not going to get into page layouts. We've kind of already covered that. Here's kind of the controller actions, controlling when the user is interacting with the application. When they click on a button, where do we take them? What's our processing flow? So if you think about just any sort of object, you go to the tab, you see the default view. And then you might go, okay, I want to see, it's in our case with custom objects, it's typically the most recent items. And then you click on the View All Go button, and then now you're seeing all your records or whatever the view is. So that's our list view. And then you select a particular record, and then now we're in the Detail view. And then you might click on the Edit button, we're in the Edit view. So all these are different views for different pages. All right. In the model view controller architecture, the model are standard and custom objects, right? The view are Visualforce pages. You can also say that the Visualforce components which exist within the pages are also a part of the view. And then the controllers, like I said, there are standard and custom controllers. There's also something called controller extensions, which allow you to extend controllers. We'll talk about that later too. Okay. All right. Visualforce basics. So let's get into some of our syntax. So Visualforce page is written with markup, and what it contains is it's going to contain those tags, it's going to contain our expressions, and then it's also going to contain standard web content. In fact, that little blurb of code down there in the lower left-hand corner, it says apex::repeat. This is a Visualforce component, and so that's our first type of content. There's curly brace exclamation posts, and then down at the bottom it says curly brace exclamation post dot post. That's our data binding, so that's our expression syntax. And then there's an anchor tag, so a and then class equals title, so on and so forth. That's another type of content, which is be standard web content. So the three main things that go into our Visualforce pages. All right. We can also reference cascading style sheets. We could reference something like a Flash file, a Swift file, in other words. So we can do, we can do a lot. All right. There is a library of Visualforce components, standard Visualforce components. There's probably about 70 of them right now. And what they do is they all start with apex:, and then they do things like render web content or do some more interesting things which do things like Ajax and so on. So, all right. All right, so here is a visualforce component. This is our input field, and input field is one of the more common ones that you'll see. The reason I know that this is a visualforce component is because it starts with apex colon. In other words, it's in the apex namespace. And the value attribute is set equal to, because it's an attribute, it appears in double quotes. But then it has curly brace, exclamation, and then object.field, in this case contact.salutation. What this will do, in this case, this is an input field, so it generates a label. Whatever I entered in as my field label, place that there. It generates the associated web control with that particular field. So in this case, salutation is a pick list, and therefore we draw or we render a drop-down list, right? And then it also goes out and gets, all right, what is the value? And in this case, in the database, it's set equal to Mr. One final thing it does is that if we had a validation rule that had a field level error, it would draw a red box around it and display the error message associated with that field. So it handles field level errors. Okay? All right. Any questions about this? This is kind of an important checkpoint about any of the syntax in blue.
So all that is embodied in the component. All that logic. In terms
Yes,
of what it's checking.
exactly. So that input field is rendering everything in that red box that's surrounding salutation and Mr. Okay.
So those parentheses and the exclamation point, they're all part of syntax, right?
Yeah, they're actually not parentheses. They are curly braces. Yeah, so the curly brace, exclamation, and then contact.salutation, that is the data binding expression. So, okay. Yes?
Can you refer to Apex controls with JavaScript? So can I throw an ID on there and then add events like whatever is available as far as like if selected or when collapsed or whatever the events might be on that control so that I can then use JavaScript to change other areas on the page?
Yes.
Can. Okay, cool.
There are also visualforce controllers. Visualforce controllers receive requests and then forward the user. They execute some logic and then they forward the user to some location. So very similar in architecture to something like a servlet. But the request comes in, they take a look at the request, they execute some business logic, possibly go out to the database, and then forward the person to another navigation location. Okay. They can also maintain state, yeah, so they can do a lot of stuff. They're written in Apex, so visualforce controllers is not something we're gonna talk about them at a high level, but in this class we don't talk about, we don't go into Apex. So in the Dev 501 class we do cover visualforce controllers and actually coding them. Okay. All right. There are three types of controllers, or really there's three. I mean, they're not all controllers, but there's three things which have controller logic. There are standard controllers. Standard controllers are available in Apex, or they're available to call from your visualforce pages. These are generated by the system. You can't see the Apex code that underlies them, but you can call them from your visualforce pages. You could also instantiate one of these in Apex code, so you could write some code and then reference them using standard object-oriented, instantiate one or call a method on one or whatever it may be. Okay. Standard controllers, like I said, are built for you. So if we go back to the MVC architecture, And we think about when we create an object. When we create an object, not only does it create the sort of the virtual table, it also creates the page layout and it creates the standard controller. So if you think about sort of our three areas of MVC, it's really creating all three of those prongs. Okay. So all right. We reference standard controllers in a page tag, and the page tag has an attribute called standard controller. And the way that we reference standard controllers is we simply use the name of the object, the API name of the object. So in this case, the API name for contact is simply contact. But if it was a position, we would do position _C. Okay?
Because it's a custom object.
Exactly, because it's a custom object. Yep. Custom controllers are Apex classes that you write. So in this case, we want to write some code to handle our requests, execute some business logic, and control navigation. Then we can write some code in Apex as a class and then reference that class within our visualforce page. So similarly to a standard controller, in a visualforce page, we would use the controller attribute and set that equal to our class, which we would then submit our request to. Okay. Controller extensions is a third option. Now, a controller extension doesn't exist by itself. It extends another controller, whether that controller be a standard controller or a custom controller. And what we can do is we can do two main things with our controller extensions. We can override existing methods, or we can implement new methods and provide additional functionality to our visualforce pages. The way we reference our controller extensions is through the extensions tag, and we can reference one or many Apex classes in order to call those. Once again, these are custom-coded Apex classes, much like our custom controllers.
But can you only extend the standard controllers? Or
You can also extend custom controllers, yeah. So I could have Apex page controller equals my controller, and then extensions equals some other. So it's not just for standard controllers.
So is it kind of like a concept of inheritance, and you just, you know?
Conceptually, it's like that. In reality, it's not. So.
I mean, I just don't, why would you extend a custom controller when you can just, I guess if somebody else created a custom controller and you want to use the logic there and then add on your own.
Yeah. Yeah, there's probably, it does not use object-oriented inheritance, but it uses a technique that is similar but different. So. All right, expressions and data binding. So our data binding expressions are contained within the curly brace exclamation, and then typically what you see is object.field. So we're typically referencing or pulling data from the database, and we can do that by referencing which object we want to get and then which field we'd like to pull the data value from. Okay? Much like I showed you with that contact salutation. When we're doing that, the way that we have context, so if I'm saying, show me the value for the salutation field on the contact, well, how do I know which record? There's a gazillion contacts in my database, right? Well, the way we do that is on that last line where we say we have a query string parameter, and we're setting ID equal to our record ID. So one of the things you'll see in visualforce pages is the query string parameter, which is delimited by the question mark, and then ID equals, and then there's our 15-digit ID. Okay. So there's also, you'll see that curly brace exclamation, and then it has $user. This is what's called a global variable, and this references the currently logged in user. You might remember this from when we were creating formula fields. There were the $user and some $organization, some other stuff. This is the same global variable, and in this case, $user is the currently logged in user.
So do these have scopes? Like, I mean, obviously global is going to last as long
Yeah.
as the system is around.
What
Well, I'm thinking
scope?
about when you say global, I'm thinking automatically the scope of the, you know, the life of that variable,
Mhm.
which is going to be long as you have Salesforce installed.
No,
Is it, you
no,
know,
no. Global in the sense that a global variable is something where. What's that?
Accessible to everything?
Yeah, and there's one copy, and it's accessible from everywhere. So it's not it's things which are not unique to a current instance of visualforce or Apex or whatever. It's, you know, get me information about the current organization, you know, or the currently logged in user. So it's not, yeah, okay, yeah, all right. Versioning, we talked about that. Our versions allow us to, it allows us to associate a version, therefore ensuring that your code works with each new release, because we leave that version equal to whatever it is. You could then also go in and update that, right?
Chris?
Yes.
Do we have the version concept in the page layouts and whatever the standard thing that we are using?
No, there's not. In page layouts, there is not a version associated with that page layout per se.
Just not page layouts, any objects, custom objects.
It, no, like objects are not stored with a version. Apex code is. Apex code has a version. I'm trying to think what else does. Everything else, those sort of setup menu things typically are upgraded with Salesforce when they are upgraded.
I see. So if we want to have a copy of what we did last time and we just wanted to do a update or on something that we already created and we did some mistake and we want to roll back to the previous version, how would we do that?
Well, we're not changing. It's not like we're going out and going to your, you know, your custom position object and saying that we want to start changing our fields or something. So, you know, let's say that we add a new feature for custom objects, and then what we're going to do is we're going to end up updating the metadata definition to contain that new feature, and now we need to upgrade your current version to the new metadata definition so that you can now take advantage of that new feature. I mean, you can, I mean, if this is something that you're concerned about, which, you know, I think we're pretty conscientious about this kind of stuff, but, you know, if you wanted to, for instance, take the XML file, which represents the layout for a candidate, for instance. This is just an XML file. You can download it via the force.com IDE, which really uses the metadata API. And you can take this XML file and back it up. But then that's really not, I mean, if there's not a version really, there's not like a, you know, this is version 15. Yeah.
You can put it into source control, right?
You can put it into source control. I can't think of a situation where having this around would do you much good, in the sense that it's not really changes that we apply, it's changes that you apply, which is why you have version control. Does that make sense? Because, yeah. Because if we update page layouts to do something differently, then you can't go back to the previous version if we don't offer you, you know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, so. But we don't do that a lot anyways, so yeah. All right. Standard tags start with the Apex namespace. We're going to talk about how you can create custom tags or custom components. Those start with the C namespace. Now, you might go out to the App Exchange and download some App Exchange apps. And in those cases, you can the App Exchange partner registers their namespace, and then they can use that namespace to represent or to reference their unique namespace within their app. So if they create something that you possibly have a custom tag with the same name, you're not going to have a problem because you each have their own names. You each have your own unique namespaces. Oh, all right. So we've created, let's pretend we've created all these visualforce pages. And now they exist out there, but they're kind of free floating. Well, how can we incorporate those visualforce pages into our application? Well, the way we can do it is to create either custom links and buttons within our existing application. Remember that we can create a custom link or a custom button in our object definition and then add it to a page layout. So a button on a page, we might create a custom button that goes to a visualforce page. Now we could also create or override a standard button or link so that when a user clicks on a standard link, it takes us to the visualforce page. So maybe in those list of records, we override the edit. So when a user edits a record, they then automatically go into a visualforce page. We can also do things where we override tabs. So when a user clicks on a tab, we could then display a visualforce page, right? Yeah.
You're able to edit tab as well, host a web page as well, were you saying, or something?
Yeah, it is within the tab that you're hosting. You remember when we created tabs, there was 3 types of tabs: custom object, web tab, and then visualforce page tab. So in that case, the user clicks on it. But if you create a visualforce page in which you're overriding a link or a button, it still runs inside of that current tab. So yeah, does that make sense? Okay, all right. We can also take visualforce pages. We can embed them into page layouts. We can embed them into other visualforce pages, and we can embed them into dashboards. We can also utilize visualforce in email templates. So there's a whole bunch of places where we can utilize visualforce, and the point here is that you can utilize visualforce without your users really detecting that you've snuck in some visualforce pages. Okay. All right. Oh, there's also custom help. You can now use visualforce. The great thing about visualforce and a lot of Apex stuff is that you can kind of pick and choose where you want to implement these different technologies. So you might want to create some Apex code, like a trigger that uses a standard page layout. Or you could create a visualforce page but use the standard controller. So you can update the UI only, or you could update the business logic only. Or you could update both. Or you could update neither. In which you're probably should take off for this class, or this section. The one exception to this that I want to point out is that you cannot, from a page layout, directly call a custom controller. Okay? So when you call a custom controller, you do that through a visualforce page. Okay? So the link between a custom control or the only way you're able to access that is through a visualforce page. Now I said directly, and the reason I said directly is that you could create a situation where a button on a page layout calls a visualforce page, and the visualforce page immediately calls the controller. So you can do kind of a workaround for that if you wanted to implement that type of behavior. But like I said, a page layout cannot directly call a custom controller. Okay.
So this thing is not through the standard look and feel custom behavior?
Same development.
Sorry, what, you said custom looping behavior?
No, standard look and feel. And
Oh,
then
standard
custom
look and
behavior.
feel. So standard look and feel, yeah. Oh, and then it says custom behavior. So it says page layouts and custom Apex classes. Well, That's true if you are implementing Apex in the form of triggers. What you cannot do is, from a page layout, call custom controller code written in Apex directly. Okay, so, but you can still execute Apex code, but it would need to be a database-oriented trigger that fires it off, not a controller. Okay. Murat, did you have a question?
The same question.
Same question. Wow, that's. No. Comparing visualforce and S controls. So visualforce has two primary advantages over S controls. Visualforce is server-side execution versus S controls are browser-side execution, and S controls do the call out via web services, and visualforce is running on the server, so it doesn't need to do that. So the advantage number one for visualforce is that it's much better performance. Okay. Now, primary advantage number two is that visualforce pages are a tag markup language, and S controls are a JavaScript procedural code language. Now, when you're creating user interfaces, it's much more friendly to utilize a markup language rather than a procedural UI. So much easier to write those. Okay. Especially if you're a web designer, then you're familiar with most of the concepts. Yeah.
You said the performance is better in visualforce when in S control you can do Ajax. So wouldn't it be faster in some cases in S control than visualforce?
Visualforce also does Ajax. So things like partial page refreshes. The advantage of visualforce, and this is another advantage, is that you don't have to actually write the JavaScript that calls the Ajax. We will write that JavaScript for you. So in the S control world, you'd have to utilize this JavaScript API that utilizes Ajax to do those partial page refreshes, stuff like that.
So is there any place we would have to use S controls, or like if we're starting from scratch, we could always use visualforce?
Yeah, so the official party line from Salesforce is that if you're developing UIs, do it in visualforce. Okay.
So there isn't any place
we are deprecating them. We are going to prevent our customers from creating new S controls sometime next year. Our customers' existing S controls will continue to work, and they can continue to edit those, but we're going to prevent people from creating new ones. So going forward, visualforce. In fact, in summer '09, we added 2 new supports for visualforce that now bring visualforce up to S control. It used to be that if you're embedding you could embed a S control into a dashboard, and you couldn't do it in visualforce. Now you can do that. And then it used to be that if you wanted to do custom help pages, you could do it in S control, but you couldn't in visualforce. Now you can do it in visualforce. Yeah. So, all right. So let's. Here's the thing. If you want, you can use your day 4 org. If you want, you can use your previous org. Okay, the day 4 one's a little bit cleaner because it has a bunch of data in it that you just uploaded. Your choice, though. Okay, at the end of the day, it's not really necessary in terms of visualforce. All right, in your org, whichever org you choose, log in. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to launch your web browsers. In fact, I'm going to log into my day 4 org right now. All right, so
aren't they the same org with the 2 different users?
It's 2 different orgs.
But how could I see the result in this org while I was using the second user in the data import? Because I didn't change login in my Salesforce.com.
Did you change it when you were doing data loader?
Maybe because you're in your data loader, you use your.
No, I use this one.
Oh, really?
In data loader, I use this one. In the web page.
Curious thing.
And you're 100% sure about that? 'Cause
99%. That's it.
I am betting on 1%. Yeah, so it's there are two different orgs. So there's two different spaces in terms of what you can do. So, by the way, if you want to, here's a little demo. I know you guys like demos, so here, notice the format of the dashboard, the charts and graphs. Kind of an ugly, stale type of format. So in Summer 09, we made a feature available, which are new. We now support new reports and dashboards. So if I jump in here to user interface settings, I can enable new charts. So even though we released a new feature, so Murat, this is something that you were talking about or asking about. So here's a new feature, new charts, which are more colorful and interactive and so on. So we give you the opportunity to enable it. So previously I saw that. Now when I enable it, now this is once you enable it, you can't go back thing. So it's a mafia thing, all right? So now when I go to my home page, what I see is the new wizards, which have a little bit more stuff that occurs. Okay, so you'll often see that as kind of the way that we, if it's a new impactful feature, we'll do something like that.
That's under my. Where is that again?
Oh, now everyone wants to do it. Click on Setup and then Customize Reports and Dashboards and then User Interface Settings. All right, I don't want to spend too much time doing this though. Everyone got that? Nope. Customize Reports and Dashboards and User Interface Settings. Okay. All right. All right. All right, this is a follow-along exercise. So I'm going to walk you through creating a visualforce page, this Hello World page, and I'd like you to follow along with what I do. Okay. All right. So everyone, if you could click on Setup, and what I'd like you to do is to expand my personal information and to click on Personal Information.
Which ID are we using?
Go ahead and use your day 4 one. Yeah, so log in with your day 4 one. That's probably the best one. Doesn't really matter though. All right. What I'd like you to do is I'd like you to edit your user account. And when you're editing your user account, I'd like you to change a few things. I'd like you to change the first name of your user from admin to insert your first name there. So Chris, and Chris, you can copy me. All right. So you can leave the last name as user. The demo will not involve the last name field. So then what I'd like you to do is there's a checkbox over here that says development mode. And I'd like you to check the box for development mode. All right? And then I'd like you to save your changes. All right. So now you've updated your first name and you've enabled development mode. Okay. Set up my personal information, personal information. Okay. All right. Now what I'd like you to do is at the top in the URL, after salesforce.com, I want you to get rid of everything after salesforce.com. And I'd like you to enter in after salesforce.com / I'd like you to enter in apex / and then hello world. All right. Okay, and then do a carriage return. Let me know if you Yep, all right. And because we have development mode enabled, then I have a link here whereby I can create my visualforce page. Okay, so please click on Create Page Hello World. All right. And now we've created our own first page. Okay. All right. In the lower left-hand corner is a button for Page Editor. Everyone see that down there? Yeah. So what I'd like you to do is to click on that button.
That's because we are in the development mode, right?
Yep, exactly. So because we're in development mode, we can see that button. So people always ask at the end of this, they go, wait a minute, are my users going to see the Page Editor button? No. Only people who have development mode enabled will see that button. Okay? All right. Now what I'd like you to do is I would like you to delete all of that text in between the page tags. Okay?
Lines 2 through 5?
Yes. All right. And I'd like you to, in between our page tags, we're going to do a bold tag. We're going to do hello world, exclamation mark. And then we're going to do a bold end tag, which starts with a angle bracket slash. All right. And then we're going to click on Save. All right. And what we should see is hello world. Okay. If you're having some problems, just take a look at what I typed up here. Okay. All right. All right. So that's our hello world page. All right. Now we're going to make it a little bit more exciting. Instead of doing hello world, we're going to do a hello Chris. Well, maybe not Chris. So we're going to do curly brace, exclamation. Notice that there's two exclamations. The second one is just to indicate excitement. Okay. So we're going to do $, and then what do you think I'm going to do?
User
dot first name, and then close curly brace. Okay.
That's why we changed the first name in our user.
That, ooh. All right, so we're going to click on our Save button. And what this is going to do is it's going to display the first name of the currently logged in user. Do you guys want to do something more? Let's hang them up. Let's insert a couple of page breaks. Those are BR tags. These are self-contained tags. Okay, so after hello first name, do a couple of those BR tags. All right. And then what we're going to do is we are going to insert what's called an apex detail tag. Okay, so do apex. And then if you want, you can do the autocomplete here. And if you do your arrow up button, arrow down button, you can go to detail and then hit carriage return. That's the way all the cool kids do it. All right. Now, what the apex detail page, or the apex detail attribute does, is it inserts an entire page layout associated with this record. Okay. So it's almost recreating a page layout.
So what's the record?
Good question.
I mean, what's detail?
Well, yeah, exactly. All right. Very good. So we got a problem here. So we clicked on the Save button and nothing happened. All right. And the problem is that we didn't specify which record. There's a lot of stuff we didn't specify. Okay. All right. First of all, let's enter in our standard controller attribute on our page, In our case, we're going to look at a position. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to type in standard controller. And once again, you can use the code complete. And this is on the page tag. And we're going to set standard controller equal to position _C. All right. So standard controller equals position _C. Now, when I click on the Save button, a very subtle change is going to occur in the page above. And I want somebody to tell me what it is.
It's in position.
They put it on the position tab, but I knew you were correct. Still, nothing happened in our page area. All right. All right. So, but it's still just saying hello, Chris. I'm not seeing my default page layout. All right. Now, what's the problem? Does anyone know what the problem is? I'm not specifying, well, which position do you want me to display? So what we can do is we can go out and get a position ID. And the way we can get a position ID is I'm going to do a right click so that I keep my current tab open. So these days, all web browsers, all the big ones support tabs. So I'm going to right click on positions. And I'm going to open this link in a new tab. Okay, so go ahead and right click on the positions tab. And then open it up in a new window. Okay? All good? All right, then I'm going to click on View. Actually, I'll just roll with the Benefit Specialist. So let's click on our Benefit Specialist. And now, what do I have? I have a 15-digit ID up there in my URL, right? I'm going to do a copy. So I'm going to do a Control-C. All right, then what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our Hello World page. And on to the end of our URL, we're going to add question mark, ID equals, and then paste in our 15-digit ID. All right? So that you understand what this looks like at the end of the day, I will... So this is a little bit too big. Is that a little bit bigger? Now, your ID is going to be something different. Okay? All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on my carriage return. And there we go. So notice that it's updated this with our page layout. Okay? So it inserts whatever the current, whatever the page layout would be for this record. In this case, I'm not a big fan of these hover lists right above my Hello Chris. I like to accentuate that. So there's an attribute called related list, and I'm going to set related list equal to false. Okay, so on my detail tag, add in an attribute of related list equals false. And then click on the Save button. And you'll notice this will change the behavior of the detail. Yeah. Now, you're probably wondering, well, Chris, you've done this demo a bazillion times, so you know what related list is, but how do I know what related list, and how do I know all the available attributes, right? Well, there's something called the component reference, and if you see this link over here where it says component reference, we can click on that link, and that'll give us a list of all of our visualforce components. What I can do is I can scroll down to, or it's already there, scroll down to Apex Detail and click on that. And I'm going to maximize this window a little bit more. And so here, if I wanted to find out, well, what does related list do, or what are my available attributes, I can read the documentation. I can also see a little code sample. Okay. All right.
But what did it change from previously? I didn't notice any difference.
Oh, I set, I added this related list attribute equal to false. So, okay. All right. Now let's talk about adding a related list. So by setting related list equal to false, I clean things up a bit. Notice that I don't have any related list down here. Now in my case, I want to view the just the job applications. Okay. So I'm going to add another component down here. I'm going to do apex colon, and then this one's called related list of all things. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set list equal to job underscore applications double underscore R. And I'm going to click on save. Okay. Now, if I scroll down, by the way, if you want to minimize this, you see on the, unfortunately it's not being displayed. Well, I will move my window over. How about that? So if I click on this down arrow right here, that will minimize my page editor so I can see more of my actual page. So if you want to do that, you can do that. And then down here are my job applications. Unfortunately, I don't have any job applications, but there they are. All right. There's my related list.
How would you know now what are your related lists?
How would I know? Oh, like how would I know that
Job application is what
job applications double underscore R? That is something, it requires a little bit of divining. So let me show you what that requires. So if we go into, I'm going to go over to my other tab, and I'm going to click on Setup, and I'm going to go to Create Objects, and I'm going to look at I'm going to go to Job Application. Now, the trick about this is that I'm going to Job Application, and then if I click on Position, that'll tell me that if I want to refer to the job applications, it would be job applications, but then the divining part is that I need to add the double underscore R onto this because I'm referring to it. So you kind of got to know that to add that double underscore R.
A shorter question, answer to your question, there is no IntelliSense for that.
Okay. There's, in the force.com ID, in the schema browser, I could actually navigate to the position, and then in here there are child relationships, and then here's job applications, and the relationship name is job applications double underscore R. So it is in the ID in the schema browser. You could either go to the object definition of the child that you wanted to reference and see it there, or you could go into the schema browser and go directly to the object and then get the child relationship names. Okay? So.
Chris, do you provide 3 organizations for each customer, one for dev, one for test, one for production, or do they just do it on production?
Yeah, so they're called sandboxes, yeah. So sandbox environments are separate orgs where you can, it's a copy of your production environment, and then you can do your development there. And then we have a mechanism by which we can push our changes back into production. So. Murat, we cover all the details of that in Dev 501 class next week.
501?
Okay, yeah, because it's...
because you said those users will be available for 1 week.
Yeah.
Next week we will be on 501.
Yeah.
So we will not be able to use this this week's right. And then after 501 we will be on Los Angeles. Then we will not use it. At the end, when we go back to Turkey, we will have no access to anywhere. But if you have, for example, as you said, we are now working for Genentech, in fact, for this. So maybe in Genentech we will have an access for sandboxes of them and get a
organizations. Yeah. So depending upon your licensing, larger organizations have many sandboxes. Smaller customers typically only have one sandbox, but it is a separate environment in which you can do development. So
hopefully they will have a sandbox for us.
Yes, yeah, I would imagine they do.
The sandbox has access to production data in order to...
Yeah, there's different versions of sandboxes. Some copy over the application data, some do not.
Depending on the licenses side.
Depending upon, yeah, so the one that copies over the application data, those are...
Are the databases different for sandbox and production environments? It should be.
Yeah, it's two separate databases. So data changes made to your sandbox had nothing to do with your production environment. Yeah. They're two different orgs. Yeah. All right, so now let's do something really fun and cool. All right, what we're going to do is we got this crazy requirement, and we want to build a form on this page, and we want to allow the end user to be able to change the name of the position or the job title, and then to change the status of the position without having to click on the edit button. All right. Pretending we don't know we don't know that inline editing exists. Okay. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to add a form. So after our hello Chris, what we're going to do is we're going to add an Apex form. Okay. Oops. All right. Notice it does a form is an area, so it does both a beginning tag and an ending tag. All right. After the form, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create something called a page block. Once again, I'm going to do Apex page block. Okay. Like so. Then inside of the page block, I'm going to do an Apex page block section, like so. All right. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to now, inside our page block section, we're going to add an input field. So we're going to do Apex, and then we're going to do input field, like that. And in this case, we're going to reference the job title here. Now, what's the name of my job title field? Name, right? So, all right, so the way that we reference a particular field is we're going to set the value attribute equal to, and this is where we're going to do some data binding, some more data binding. We're going to do curly brace, exclamation, and then we're going to enter in position _C dot name, close curly brace. All right.
Now here's where it doesn't give you a list of your objects, so you're doing the binding.
No, it does not. Yeah.
How come you didn't use dollar this time?
It's not a global variable. Yeah. All right.
So the standard objects are automatically they're a global variable or not?
They're not.
What are the list of the global variables?
The global variables are in the docs. If you do a search for $user, you'll see the list. It's also in the appendix of your course guide. So the last page is the appendix, or somewhere around there. All right. Okay. So we're going to click on the Save button, and what it's going to do is it's going to create another page block up here. Okay. where I have some, I have a input control with a label being displayed. Okay. Any questions about that?
Let's change the alignment of that label because it's like kind of.
No, the alignment is done automatically. There are other things you could do. Yeah, the alignment is, in this case, done automatically. Yeah.
And it's not case sensitive?
Oh, it's not. No, it's not case sensitive. So if I go in here and use a lowercase name or something like that, no different. Okay. All right. All right, let's add another field. And in this case, we're going to do an apex. Now, I'm going to do another input field, like so. And this time, the value is going to be equal to position _C, and I want to insert the status field. How do I insert the status field? What's the name of the status field?
Status __ C.
There we go. Close curly brace. Now when I click on save, notice what it does. Instead of doing a single line entry field, it does a drop-down list. Okay. Then what we're going to do
How did it know that it should put it on the right but not in the bottom of the title?
Can you repeat that?
How did it know that the status should be in the second column, not as a second row?
Yeah. It simply, it kind of does a left to right, and then
so when you create a section through the apex, it is by default it's 2 column sections.
Yes, yeah. Yeah.
So if your page layout was 1 column, would it inherit the parent page layout, or is this considered entirely separate?
It's, in this case, the page block is considered entirely separate. Yeah.
The page block section has columns properties.
Yes, Lyra, you're getting ahead of me.
What did she say? Page block section has the
we'll all find out. All right, so next thing I'm going to do is, the problem here is that even if I go in and I change benefit specialist to benefit specialist level 2, well, the problem is I can't actually save it, right? There's no button. So there's a control, visualforce component called a command button. And so what I'm going to add in here is apex command button. Now in this case, the value is what will be displayed on the button. Okay? So I'm gonna label this one update. Okay. Now there's another attribute that I need though, and that's the action attribute. And action is, we're going to do something called action binding. It's just like data binding, except we are enabling our button to do something. And so the action binding here is an action called save. So we'll come back to all the different actions that are available. But what we're doing is we're giving our button the ability to save the data contained within the form. Okay? All right? So now,
save is a controlling action, right? So that's save.
A controlling action. Oh, save, yes. Save is defined within my standard controller. It's one of the actions in my standard controller. Very good. All right. So now I got this update button, but I don't know about you, but this looks pretty ugly. See how the update button went down to the third row, or I'm sorry, the second row? Well, wouldn't it be great if we could do a 3-column page block? So, Lyra, do you have any ideas on how we might be able to do that?
I don't know.
In the page block section tag, there is an attribute called columns. And what we're going to do is we're going to set columns equal to 3. Okay, so in our page block section, not the page block, but the page block section, we're going to set that equal to 3. And then look at that, we now have 3 columns, okay, in our page block.
And it always goes left, right, Z order.
Yeah.
You can't override that with a special little.
You can do things like you can insert. You don't follow along with this. I'll just show you a little quick demo. You can insert a page block section item, and then you can go like this and just do an empty one. And what this does is it essentially creates an empty cell. So in this case, here the middle one is an empty cell. So if you wanted to, you could do stuff like that, or you could set columns equal to 1 if you wanted a single column. So you could do like that. So there's other things that you can do to make this do
Can you
different
put
stuff.
the update
You can't like say
on the
center
right
or.
No, you know, yeah, I don't think it. Normally, you don't put buttons in the form or in the field area or page block section item. Normally, you put them up across the top here, anyways. But yeah, we'll show you how you can do buttons up here, but yeah, it defaults over to the left-hand side. So, all right, so I'm going to get rid of that, and I'm going to get rid of my columns equals 1, set it back to 3. So now we are all back on the same page, and we all have a good-looking form here. All right. Now, in addition, I want to delineate or highlight my page block section up here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go out and sort of borrow the style of another object. And in my case, I'll just show you the zip codes has a nice purple color here that really stands out. So, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the tab style. Thank you, tab style. So on my page block, I'm going to set the tab style equal to zip code _C. All right, so that's another thing that we can enable. And what this is going to do when I click on the Save button is it's going to apply the zip code page style to my page block. All right. My page block could also be kind of cool if it had a title. And why don't we give this the title of quick change. All right. Now notice that the page block down here has position detail. When I do this, now I've created my own custom title, and then here we have quick change. All right.
In standard page layout, I think there is only one page block we can use, right? Because there is no, as far as I remember, you can insert page sections, but not page blocks.
You can insert multiple page blocks. Yeah. Yeah. That's doable. Trust me.
So how do you find out what different items can go within a tag and stuff like that?
Different attributes?
Different attributes.
Oh, definitely go to the component reference. So bring up our component reference, and so what can I do with a Apex? So okay. All right. Now let's test this out. So what I'd like you to do is I would like you to make a change to your benefit specialist, maybe benefit specialist II, maybe update the status. Okay. Now let's click on our update button. And if we take a look, our title has been updated. The value for our field has been updated. And now the status is new. All right. What's that? There we go. Now, one thing that occurred was that it took me to the standard view page. So notice that my URL up here, because I'm using the standard controller, the behavior of the standard controller is upon save, take the user to the view page, just the standard view page. And so that's what happened in my case. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, I would like to update the behavior of my application. And the other thing that I don't like is that in order to get to my visualforce page, I need to get the ID and I need to type in Apex and hello rolled and then question mark ID equals, and boy, my users really hate doing that. I want to incorporate this into my recruiting application. All right. So the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to go to my setup menu. Okay. And in my setup menu, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to create objects, and I'm going to update my position object. So click on create and then updates. And then I'd like you to click on position. Okay. Yeah, create objects and then position. Now, I'm going to override anytime a user looks at a record. I'm going to override the view. Okay. So by clicking on override view, so I clicked on, what I did was I clicked on create objects and then scroll all the way down to standard buttons and links. Standard buttons and links. Now what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to click on the override button next to view. All right. And then I want you to select the radio button for visualforce page. And I'd like you to select hello rolled as the visualforce page that you'd like to override, or the page you'd like to override the view with. All right. So let's click on save. All right. All good?
Did that appear in the list of content name because you had the standard controller?
Yes, it did. Yes, it's that standard controller reference that makes it appear in that list. If it doesn't have that, it won't appear in that list. Very good.
So now you're modifying the behavior of that standard controller every time they...
Yep, we are.
So everybody will go there, regardless, will go to your hello.
So let's test it out. Let's find out what happens. So now I'm going to click on my positions tab. Okay. And I'm going to go take a look at my assistant to the director of support. Okay. I'm going to click on that link. And hey, whoa. What the? Look at that. It even says hello, Chris. All right.
So is it only the person who working on this will see this, or?
Only the person who has the development mode enabled will see this ugliness down here.
Actually done in the live production?
This up here is. So what I did was I changed the behavior of viewing a position record. So if I'm an end user and I view a position record, I'm now going to see this.
So everybody is going to see
Everybody.
that.
Yeah. This is I applied this to the object. I've changed the behavior of the object.
So this is working on live, not like on the sandbox where we're just doing it.
Well, yeah. I mean, we're so you wouldn't want to be doing this in your production environment. So we are because we're in training, but yeah, you'd want to do this in a sandbox. Yeah. So, yeah. Yes.
What if you want to just leave this position alone and then just deal with your hello world? So in other words, if I'm in hello world, I want to go stay in hello world in my view. But if I'm in position, I stay in the same setup, the same default setup.
Yeah, I mean, you could do that, but how would you ever get to the visualforce page then? That's the problem, is that if you say I don't want to override the default behavior, then how would you ever get to that?
Let's say I create another
So you create
tab,
like a custom button or something like that?
or another tab to have that. Is that possible?
Sure. Yeah, so in this case, what you could do is that you would want to override the save action in a custom controller or a controller extension so that when the user clicked on save from this page, it would then send them back to this page. In that case, we would not be overriding the default action. So the short answer is yes, you could do that, but that logic would need to be stored in a method on a controller extension. So we'd have to code that navigation logic. Okay. All right. All right. So if I go in here and I change the status of this, so assistant to the director, let's change this to level 2 again, or director of support. Oops, there's more to it. Now what's going to happen when I click on the update button? It stays here. So it forwards me to whatever the view page is. Well, this is the view page. All right, so let's continue in our presentation and talk about a few more topics and talk a little bit more about some basic syntax. First thing I'd like to talk about is force.com sites. This is just a very brief intro. Force.com sites is a new feature that we recently enabled with version or Summer 09. And so it is included in your subscriptions, and what force.com sites allows you to do is to build public-facing websites utilizing visualforce pages. You can also incorporate them into your domain, so it allows you to, you don't have to necessarily have the domain or the URL be force.com. It can be a domain that you register. So there's a lot of stuff that people are starting to do with these. So things like intranets and websites and portals and web applications. There's, I wish I, yeah, let's say I would try and do a demo, but there's, at the developer.force.com, there is a gallery of sites doing, so live sites doing different things. In fact, all right, I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm going to take a big risk here. Let's see if I can find it. Oh.
I have a question.
Yes.
It says unauthenticated websites. So you don't provide authentication mechanism at all with these?
Oh, with force.com? No, we do not.
So what about the other application development using visualforce pages? Inside the Salesforce platform itself, whatever we've been covering for the last 4 or 5 days. So can we implement authentication?
No, because we have our own authentication within Salesforce.
Okay, I'm not sure. Let's say I'm trying to create an application inside Salesforce.com for a particular set of users. And I want to implement authentication for those users, so only those users can see. So is it just by profile and something like that?
Yeah, so they log into Salesforce just as you would, and then their profile would determine what they see in terms of apps and so on and so forth.
Okay, so if I want to integrate that Salesforce application in one of my other app that I created in a different technology.
Okay.
So is there something called single sign-on so
yes.
I can integrate?
Yes.
And just
Okay. So yes. So I'm not too knowledgeable about it, but I know that we can utilize single sign-on type techniques. We must have some sort of LDAP integration. I don't know how it works, honestly, but I do know that if you go out in the user ID and you go to or developer.force.com and you search for single sign-on, I know that people have done things with our single sign-on features to incorporate apps into others and vice versa and so on. So I do know we have functionality, but I just haven't used it. So yeah.
Yeah, there's in admin setup, security controls, there's single sign-on settings.
Yeah, yeah. And then I know there's some stuff in the docs about that too. So let's. So there's a lot of companies out there that have created web applications already on force.com sites, and for instance, we kind of use it. We used it so that when people were registering for, so if you're registering for Dreamforce, you're using a force.com sites application. We also use it for developer.force.com and a number of different uses. So, if you want to see what other people are doing, if, like I said, if you go out to this gallery, you can see what, here it is, what I wanted to show you. So you can go out here and see these different sites that have been built. All right, the one I wanted to show you is careers.thomasnet.com. And so ThomasNet, here's a demo, and then take a look at this. So here we have a force.com sites application in which we are publishing recruiting information. So for instance, a user can click on a sales associate for Long Island. And so here we have our position details, and we can either apply for it or return to positions. Okay. So you can do some kind of cool stuff, or and especially, considering we've been working on the recruiting application for 4 days. Take that information. Not too hard to imagine now how you could take that information, publish it on the internet, and then now instead of people filling out candidate information based on emails or something like that. Instead, users are applying for positions on their own and filling out forms associated with collecting information about their own demographic candidate information. Okay? All right. The way that you do this is you build a force.com application. You would then build the visualforce pages that would be a part of that. So we need to, once again, we need to have our, the data model to be able to store the data that the users are entering and that you want to query, create our visualforce page. Within the tool, you can then create a force.com site. It's not something that's enabled within our orgs, but it's something that you can have enabled. And then you activate your site, and then now users can go out and utilize that site. So a number of different things you could do. So collect information or publish any sort of information. So I just showed you the recruiting portal. You could also create, sort of an advanced web to lead. So if you're collecting cases or leads or any sort of thing, or maybe you're taking solutions and you're publishing them. So you could do kind of a knowledge application, something along those lines. So. Event registration, like I said, if you register for Dreamforce, you'll be using a force.com site. Okay. And it's depending upon what type of license that you've purchased, you actually get a number of force.com sites that you can set up, and then it's included within your, within your base cost. Okay.
Does it have another special IDE for it?
Can you repeat that?
Special design environment for it, or are those pages designed?
It's all just based on visualforce pages. Now, when somebody else is creating, when somebody else is creating a web page like the one I just showed you at ThomasNet, then they're going to be going out and using a Dreamweaver or something like that to create the page, using a WYSIWYG tool. But then they're going to then go in and edit that probably. So after they've created the, all of the design stuff, then probably go back into that and have a developer add in the components or the, the stuff that then hooks it into Salesforce. Any of those pages, I'm sure they're not using the inline editor to build all that content. So.
I saw that there was those red lines between before the fields that were required. So, for example, we didn't, I think, talk about this. When we, for example, say in the visualforce page to take a field, does it take all the properties with it, like the required red bar there and the validation
Yeah.
things like that.
Well,
Does it take all of them?
Well, if it does, if you use an input field, it does. So an input field will display the red bar indicating its requiredness if that's how you've configured that field.
And then the error message will show beneath it then, like if they didn't. And
yeah.
tried to
So
save
then
or
it would. So the other, thing about an input field is that it then has the ability to display error messages associated with the red marking around it. All right. So quiz time. Who did I leave off on? Whose turn is it? Raj. All right. What kind of content can be included in a visualforce page? And please answer it in the 3 categories that I highlighted.
HTML.
So any sort of standard web content. Very good.
Apex tags which render down to HTML.
Yeah, so they start with Apex, but they're visualforce components or visualforce tags.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I can't remember the last one.
It's the curly brace exclamation sign.
Expressions.
Your expressions, exactly. So do some data binding, action binding. Okay. You said Apex, and the reason you see the Apex namespace is that when these were originally created, they were going to be called Apex pages. And then they decided at the last minute, let's call them visualforce pages. And that's why they're called visualforce pages. But you'll see if you, for instance, in the, if you're writing Apex code, the actual name of the class is Apex page. And so it's in the API, but that was the reason you see that is was the original name. So, all right, Leah, what is the MVC pattern and how does it relate to visualforce? And here I'm looking for a 10-minute answer.
Sure, okay. Model controller.
Very good. And what's the model?
The model will be your data model.
Your data model. Very good. The model is your data model.
Objects, fields, and relationships.
Very good.
Our viewer, and programmatically, what you're talking about now is visualforce.
Yeah. So our view is our visualforce page, and what would be our controller?
Well, we have 3 controller, not types, but
3 types of controllers.
Not really 3 types because extensions aren't.
They aren't really controllers on their own. Very good. So a controller extension isn't really a controller on its own, but it performs controller functionality.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 3 things that controller functionality. There you go. Standard controllers, custom controllers, and extension controllers that can extend either standards or custom.
Very good. So we have our standard controllers, the ones created out of the box. We have custom controllers, and then we have controller extensions. All right. Talon. What do curly brace expressions refer to when used in visualforce components? That's the another way of putting that.
To get the associated objects members values.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's in the case of data binding, we're going out to that object, we're going out and getting the field values associated with that. There's other things we can do, and we'll talk about that. What are the ways that visualforce pages can be incorporated into the rest of your user interface?
Yeah, if I understood it right, I think these are the tools that we can use to incorporate, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one of them would be in the setup menu, we have a link to that.
Yeah.
We have
So in other words, how can your users access your visualforce pages without having to actually type something into the URL?
That we should go and override.
Yeah, override standard buttons.
Standard buttons.
Override standard links. Yeah.
Standard views. Is it what is asked here?
Yes. Yeah. You could create a well, not a custom app, but a custom app might have a tab that then displays a visualforce page. Okay.
And for example, your links or buttons in your pages can refer to those visualforce pages.
Yeah, and you can create custom links and buttons. Yeah, so there's a number of different ways. We can also embed visualforce pages as a dashboard component. We can update email templates to use visualforce, and we can update or override the help to use visualforce. So we can also embed visualforce into a page layout or embed visualforce into another visualforce page. So, all right, Lyra, is it always necessary to know Apex to create visualforce pages?
Maybe not.
It is not. We didn't need to know any Apex to create our visualforce page, right? We can use the standard controller. Yeah. And then when might it become necessary? And that will be answered 2 slides ahead.
When you need to customize, or
when you need to customize either the business logic or the navigation. 2 main things that you're going to be customizing. Okay. Very good. What are some differences between visualforce and S-controls?
I know the answer in Spanish.
Wait, does anyone speak Spanish other than Mauricio? So there's 2 advantages that visualforce pages have over S-controls.
I remember that with visualforce, you can have an HTML and XML.
Yeah, so visualforce pages are created using a markup syntax versus S-controls, which is a procedural code. And then what was the other one?
I believe that performance is
better performance, exactly.
Because everything runs on Salesforce instead of
being downloaded to the client web browser and doing another round trip to get data.
And there were like 3 or 4 more.
Oh, there's a bunch, but those are the 2 big ones. So, all right.
For more information on Salesforce.com training and certification, please visit www.salesforce.com/training.